Hello everyone, my name is Nikita Fadiana from IBN class, and today we are in week 12 and I will present about fixed exchange rates, which is in chapter 16. So let's get started.
Chapter 16 Fixed Exchange Rates. First, I will explain about the alternative exchange rate regimes. The model of exchange rate determination we developed in chapter 15 assume that the nominal exchange rate is perfectly flexible. However, in reality, there is a menu of exchange rate arrangements from which a country can choose. This menu is presented in table 16.1. As you can see in this table, in 2008, 40 countries pursued a floating or flexible exchange rate regime, in which the monetary authority did not intervene to influence the market value of the nominal exchange rate, allowing it to be determined by the play of market forces. 44 countries maintain a managed floating regime, in which the monetary authority may have intervened by buying and selling its currency to influence the nominal exchange rate in some way. 2 countries use crawling bands in which the monetary authorities intervened to maintain the nominal exchange rate in a bond around a central rate, and these bands were periodically adjusted. 8 countries employed crawling pegs. Here, the nominal exchange rate was fixed in value to another currency or to a basket or collection of other currencies, but adjusted periodically by small amounts. 71 countries pursued fixed exchange rates or fixed pegs, in which monetary authorities adopted a policy goal of keeping the nominal exchange rate at a fixed value in terms of another currency or in terms of a basket of other currencies. Additionally, 13 countries pursued an extreme form of fixed exchange rate known as a currency board. Here, the monetary authority is required to fully back up the domestic currency with reserves of the foreign currency to which the domestic currency is pegged. Finally, 10 countries went even a step further and maintained no independent currency whatsoever. There is one issue that has arisen in the analysis of exchange rate regimes is their durability or ability to persist over time without a necessary change or transition to another regime. A more thorough analysis based on a more sophisticated conception of regime change for the 1975 until 2001 is presented in table 16.2. The average durability of all regimes across all countries is just over 11 years. We see in this table that for all countries, peg exchange rates are quite durable with an average duration of 23 years. But for emerging markets, the average durability of pegs is only 8 years, a significant difference. As can also be seen in this table, free floats are very durable in advanced countries, but much less so in developing and emerging countries. This is due to problems with volatility in the latter sets of countries. The overall conclusion we can take from table 16.2 is that there is probably no one-size-fits-all exchange rate regime that works for all countries in the world economy. Indeed, as has been pointed out by many observers, the durability of exchange rate regimes can depend on other fundamentals, such as low inflation, prudential financial regulation, and capital account policies. Nevertheless, the choice of exchange rate regime is a very important decision for a country. Next is a model of fixed exchange rates. In contrast to the case of the flexible or floating exchange rate regime, we consider the polar opposite case of a fixed exchange rate regime. As in chapter 15, Mexico is pointed as our home country and the US is pointed as our foreign country. The currency market we focus on is again the peso market, and we include the asset consideration of chapter 15. Although the peso began floating in 1995, in previous years it had indeed been fixed against the US dollar. You can see from the table 16.3 on the screen. so we refer to the balance of payments in the discussion that follows. Before beginning, we need to establish some terminology. The first two rows of Table 16.4 repeat the flexible exchange rate terminology of Chapter 15. The third and fourth rows introduce new terminology for the fixed exchange rate regime. Let's consider them one at a time. Under a fixed exchange rate regime, when the Mexican government raises E and thereby decreases the value of the peso, there is said to be a devaluation of the peso. This contrasts with a market-driven, upward movement in E under a flexible exchange rate regime known as depreciation. Under a fixed exchange rate regime, when the Mexican government lowers E and thereby increases the value of the peso, there is said to be a revaluation of the peso. This contrasts with a market-driven downward movement in E under a flexible exchange rate regime known as an appreciation. In practice, devaluations are much more common than revaluations. And also, there is some additional terminology we need to understand in the case of a fixed exchange rate regime, and we will address this with the help of figure 16.1. This diagram represents the peso market as we developed in Chapter 15. Suppose that E0 represents the equilibrium exchange rate under a flexible exchange rate regime. This is where the supply of pesos given by the trade deficit equals to the demand for pesos given by foreign savings. Suppose that the Mexican government chooses to fix the exchange rate at E1. The value of the peso 1 per E1 is therefore above the equilibrium value of the peso 1 per E0. This situation is known as an overvaluation of the peso. Note that an overvaluation of the peso implies an excess supply of pesos or an excess demand for dollars. How can this be sustained? There must be some additional demand for pesos or supply of dollars. As we see in Table 16.3, this can come from three sources: positive net income, positive net transfers, and positive net official reserve transactions. Let's examine the last of these in some detail. If E is fixed at E1, there is an excess non-official supply of pesos or demand for dollars. Mexico's central bank can address this by selling its holding of dollars or buying pesos. In this process of drawing down foreign reserves, the central bank helps to eliminate the excess supply of pesos or demand for dollars. It is for this reason that we often find countries with overvalued currencies drawing down their foreign reserves. Next, suppose that the Mexican government chose to fix the exchange rate at E2. The value of the peso 1 per E2 is therefore below the equilibrium value of the peso 1 per E0. This situation is known as undervaluation of the peso. Note that an undervaluation of the peso implies an excess demand for pesos or an excess supply of dollars. This situation can be sustained via some additional supply of pesos or demand for dollars. As we can see in Table 16.3, this can come from negative net income, negative net transfers, and negative net official reserve transactions. Again, it is worthwhile to examine the last of this in some detail. Mexico's central bank can address the excess demand for pesos or supply of dollars by buying dollars or selling pesos. In this process of building up foreign reserves, the central bank helps to eliminate the excess demand for pesos or supply of dollars. The conclusion we reach here is that central banks in countries with undervalued currencies tend to draw down foreign exchange reserves. Vice versa, central banks in countries with undervalued currencies tend to build up foreign. The next one is interest rates and exchange rates. There is another approach to maintaining fixed exchange rates by affecting the equilibrium rate, which is E0. This approach is best analyzed using the interest rate parity condition, which the formula can be seen on the screen. Suppose that the Mexican government successfully ensures that a fixed rate, E3, is an equilibrium rate. What must be the relationship between E3 and e to the power of e? A moment of thought tells us that if E3 is both a fixed and equilibrium rate, then E3 must equal to e to the power of e. This causes a change in our interest rate parity condition. Because e to the power of e will equal to e, it means e to the power of e minus e is 0, and therefore R Mexico will equal to R US. This relationship tells us that for the Mexican government to maintain a fixed equilibrium exchange rate, it must ensure that its interest rate equals that in the US. Another way of looking at this is shown at figure 16.2. By increasing or decreasing R Mexico into equality with R US, the Mexican government can move the SF graph to the left or right until the equilibrium E and E3 are identical. The role of credibility. Our discussion of interest rates and fixed exchange rates has been based on the expected rate of depreciation being 0 in equation 16.2. However, we noted that expectations regarding the future exchange rate can be volatile and subject to a host of economic and political events. For example, if a fixed exchange rate comes under a pressure from an incipient fall in demand, which shift of SF to the left, this pressure must be alleviated via an increase in the domestic or home country interest rate. There are two difficulties here. First, increases in interest rates are recessionary in that they suppress domestic investment. Second, increases in interest rates can potentially wreak havoc in fragile domestic financial systems, particularly when capital can leave the country in the form of capital flight. The reason for this is that investors know what the potential negative impacts of an interest rate can be, and this information feeds back into expectations. If investors begin to question the willingness and ability of the home country government to defend the fixed peg with interest rate increases, the expected rate of depreciation again becomes positive and the peg is no longer credible. The next one is the impossible trinity. Our discussions in this chapter lead up to a concept in international finance that has received a lot of attention lately. It is known as the impossible trinity. The impossible trinity recognizes that in the realm of international finance, countries would ideally like to pursue three desired objectives. The first one is monetary independence, second one is exchange rate stability, and the last one is capital mobility. As it turns out, however, countries must sacrifice one of the above desired objectives in order to achieve the other two. The impossible trinity illustrated in figure 16.3 helps to explain why this is the case. We develop your understanding of this figure in three steps. First, suppose a country wants to maintain both capital mobility and exchange rate stability. This indicates that the only way to maintain both capital mobility and exchange rate stability is to pursue a fixed exchange rate regime. The desired objective that the country must give up is in the one on the side of the triangle opposite of the fixed exchange rate corner, which is monetary independence. Second, suppose a country wants to maintain both capital mobility and monetary independence. This indicates that the only way to maintain both capital mobility and monetary independence is to allow the currency to float. The desired objective that the country must give up is the one on the side of the triangle opposite the flexible exchange rate corner, which is exchange rate stability. Last, suppose a country wants to maintain both monetary independence and exchange rate stability. This indicates that the only way to maintain both monetary independence and exchange rate stability is to restrict transactions on the capital account of the balance of payments in order to suppress the portfolio considerations. The desired objective that the country must give up is the one on the side of the triangle opposite the capital control corner, which is capital mobility. Currency boards. The volatility of currency values through the crisis of the late 90s led some observers to suggest the use of currency boards to stabilize exchange rates. Currency boards are a fixed exchange rate regime with two characteristics. First, the fixed rate is presented as an inviolable commitment with legal backing in domestic legislation. Second, the central bank serving as the currency board fully backs up in its base money with foreign reserves and stands ready to exchange the domestic currency and the foreign currency in either direction in response to any such request. Currency boards are effective ways to establish sound currencies and to limit excessive money creation that can fuel inflation. It is not clear, however, how useful currency boards are in the long term for all but the smaller and most open economies. Last is the conclusion. Governments can maintain overvalued exchange rates through positive net income received, positive net transfers, and positive net official reserve transactions. These provide the requisite extra demand for the home country currency. Alternatively, governments can raise the domestic interest rate to increase the equilibrium value of the currency so that it is no longer overvalued. Government can maintain undervalued exchange rates through negative net income received, negative net transfers, and negative net official reserve transactions. These provide the requisite extra supply for the currency. Alternatively, the government can lower the domestic interest rate to decrease the equilibrium value of the currency so that it is no longer undervalued. An overvalued exchange rate is not always sustainable. The home country central bank can run out of foreign reserves to sell. Every country faces the impossible trinity in which it must sacrifice one desired objective between monetary independence, exchange rate stability, or capital mobility to attain the other two. This reality puts significant constraints on possible policies available to countries to address the realities of international finance. Okay, that's all for my explanation. Thank you for watching.